ancient Chinese capital of Chang'an. Close your eyes now and let the gentle weight of your body sink deeper into the softness beneath you. Feel the quiet stillness of this moment wrapping around you like the finest silk from distant Cathay. With each slow breath, you are drifting backward through the corridors of time, traveling across 2,000 years to an age when the world was vast, mysterious, and connected by the most remarkable network of trade routes ever known to humanity. Breathe in slowly and breathe out. Let the tension in your shoulders dissolve like morning mist over the Taklamakan desert. Feel your jaw relax, your hands grow heavy, your thoughts becoming soft and unhurried like sand dunes shifting beneath an ancient wind. You are about to embark upon the greatest journey ever undertaken by merchant, pilgrim, or wanderer. This is the story of the Silk Road, a tapestry of paths that stretched more than 4,000 miles across mountains, deserts, steppes, and fertile river valleys. A web of routes that connected the magnificent courts of Han Dynasty China to the marble halls of Rome, passing through Persian palaces, Central Asian oasis kingdoms, and countless caravanserais where travelers from 100 different lands would rest beneath the same stars. Let yourself drift now, drift across continents and centuries, as we begin our journey in the ancient Chinese capital of Chang'an. The morning sun rises slowly over the eastern walls of Chang'an, painting the curved tile rooftops in shades of amber and rose. This is the year 120 of the Common Era, during the prosperous reign of the Han Dynasty, and you find yourself standing at the edge of the greatest city in the world. Chang'an, meaning eternal peace, spreads before you in a carefully planned grid of broad avenues and narrow lanes, its massive walls stretching for miles in every direction. Within these walls live nearly 1 million souls, merchants and scholars, soldiers and silk weavers, Buddhist monks and Taoist priests, farmers bringing their goods to market, and nobles carried in silk-draped palanquins. The city awakens with the sound of bronze bells ringing from temple towers, their deep tones washing over the tile rooftops like waves upon a distant shore. Street vendors begin their morning calls, their voices rising and falling in the musical tones of the Chinese language. The air carries the scent of steaming rice and braised pork from countless breakfast stalls, mingling with the sweet fragrance of incense drifting from household shrines. Let yourself wander now through the Eastern Market, one of the two great commercial districts that serve as the heart of Chang'an's trade. The market grounds cover a vast rectangular space, divided into hundreds of specialized areas where goods from across the known world change hands each day. Here, beneath awnings of oiled cloth that filter the morning light into soft golden patterns, silk merchants display their treasures. Bolts of fabric are stacked upon wooden tables, pale, cream-colored raw silk, brilliant crimson dyed with precious cochineal, deep imperial, purple reserved for the highest nobility, and that famous shade of golden yellow that only the emperor himself may wear. Feel the silk between your fingers now, impossibly smooth, lighter than a whisper, flowing like liquid over your palms. For over 2,000 years, the Chinese have guarded the secret of silk production more closely than any state secret. The penalties for revealing how silk is made, or for smuggling silkworm eggs beyond the borders of the empire, are severe indeed. For silk is the currency that drives the greatest trade network the ancient world has ever known. The production of this miraculous fabric begins in mulberry groves throughout the Chinese countryside, where countless silkworms feed upon fresh leaves before spinning their cocoons. Each cocoon yields a single continuous thread of silk, sometimes stretching more than 900 meters in length. These threads are carefully unwound by skilled workers, their fingers moving with practiced precision honed over generations, then woven into fabric of such delicate beauty that Roman poets will write of it with wonder, believing it to be harvested from trees or combed from the sea. As you drift deeper into the Eastern Market, Past the silk merchants and their precious wares, you encounter other treasures that will make the long journey westward along the Silk Road. Here are lacquered boxes and trays, their surfaces gleaming with countless layers of tree sap applied and polished over months of patient work, decorated with scenes of mountain landscapes and flying cranes in gold and silver leaf. There are bronze mirrors polished to perfect reflectiveness, their backs cast with intricate designs of dragons and phoenixes, mythical beasts that represent the emperor and empress in Chinese symbolism. Jade carvings rest upon silk cushions, pale green nephrite worked into the shapes of bai discs and kong tubes, their purposes rooted in rituals stretching back thousands of years before even the Han dynasty arose. Porcelain vessels catch the light, their translucent walls so thin that shadows can be seen through them. This Chinese invention, created from kaolin clay fired at temperatures no Western kiln can yet achieve, will eventually give its name to the finest tableware, China itself. The glazes shimmer in shades of celadon green, pale blue, and creamy white each piece, representing the culmination of techniques refined over centuries. And there is paper, another Chinese invention that will transform the world. Thin sheets made from mulberry bark, hemp, and bamboo fibers are stacked in neat bundles, ready to carry the words of poets and philosophers, the records of merchants, and the edicts of emperors along roads that stretch toward the setting sun. As the morning advances and the sun climbs higher over Chang'an, you make your way toward the western walls of the city, toward the great gate through which countless merchants have passed on their way to distant lands. The Silk Road does not begin at any single point. It is not a road at all, but rather a network of routes, paths, and trading connections that shift and change with the seasons, with political circumstances, with the rise and fall of kingdoms along its length. But if we must choose a beginning, let it be here, at the western gate of Chang'an, where the paved streets of the capital give way to packed earth roads that wind through agricultural lands before ascending into the mountains and deserts beyond. A caravan is gathering in the staging grounds outside the gate, and you drift closer to observe the preparations. These are the preparations that will determine whether merchants live or die, whether fortunes are made or lost, whether precious goods reach their destinations or are scattered across some lonely stretch of desert. There are perhaps 60 camels being loaded by experienced handlers, their complaints rising in groaning protests as heavy packs are secured to their backs. The Bactrian camel, with its 2 humps, is the beast of choice for Silk Road travel. These remarkable animals can survive for weeks without water, can navigate treacherous mountain passes and soft desert sands, can endure both scorching heat and bitter cold. Their thick woolly coats shed naturally in summer and grow back each autumn, providing yet another valuable trade commodity. Watch the handlers work with practiced efficiency, securing bundles with complex knots that will hold firm across thousands of miles. Each camel carries approximately 400 pounds of goods, carefully balanced to prevent sores and injuries during the long journey ahead. The loads are wrapped in oiled cloth and leather to protect against rain, sand, and the occasional river crossing. The merchants themselves gather in small groups, finalizing partnerships and agreements, pooling resources for mutual protection. Traveling alone along the Silk Road is an invitation to disaster. Bandits, harsh weather, and the simple mathematics of survival all demand that merchants travel in numbers. A typical caravan might include dozens of individual traders, each contributing camels, goods, guards, and expertise to the collective enterprise. There are Chinese merchants in their long robes of quilted silk, their top knots secured with jade pins, their fingers adorned with rings of carved stone. There are Sogdian traders from the oasis cities of Central Asia, speaking their Indo-European tongue, serving as the essential middlemen of Silk Road commerce. The Sogdians have built a trading network that spans the entire route, with communities established in every major city from Chang'an to Samarkand. Their commercial relationships and family connections forming an invisible web along which goods and information flow. There are Buddhist monks joining the caravan, their shaved heads and simple robes marking them as pilgrims seeking sacred texts and teachings from India. The Silk Road serves not only as a conduit for goods but also for ideas. Buddhism entered China along these very routes, carried by monks and merchants, and even now Chinese pilgrims travel westward to visit the holy sites where the Buddha walked. A group of guards stands apart, checking their weapons and armor. These are experienced men, some Chinese soldiers completing their service, others mercenaries from the steppes who know the terrain and its dangers intimately. They carry crossbows and recurve, bows, swords, and spears, and their presence offers some measure of security against the human predators who lurk along the more remote stretches of the route. The caravan master, a weathered Sogdian named Vakush, moves among the gathered travelers with quiet authority. He has made this journey more than 20 times, knows every water source and every dangerous pass, has survived sandstorms and bandit attacks, and has seen the walls of Samarkand and the markets of Ctesiphon. His word is law during the journey, his decisions unquestioned, for the survival of all depends upon experience and wisdom that cannot be gained from books. As the sun reaches its zenith, the caravan begins to move. The camels rise with their characteristic complaints, their loads swaying as they find their rhythm. The merchants mount their horses and donkeys or take their places in simple carts. The guards spread out along the length of the column, their eyes scanning the surrounding terrain. And you drift along with them, invisible and weightless as a dream, as Chang'an shrinks behind. You and the road ahead opens into the vastness of the Chinese interior. The road westward from Chang'an passes first through the fertile Wei River Valley, a landscape of carefully tended fields and prosperous villages that has been the heartland of Chinese civilization for millennia. Wheat and millet grow in neat rows, tended by farmers in broad conical hats who pause to watch the caravan pass. Children run alongside for a while, laughing and calling out before falling behind as the camels maintain their steady pace. But as the days pass and the miles accumulate beneath the caravan's feet, the landscape begins to change. The fertile lowlands give way to drier, more rugged terrain. The villages become smaller and more widely scattered. The road climbs gradually but persistently, ascending toward the high plateau of the Chinese interior. Feel yourself relaxing deeper now, your breathing slow and steady, matching the unhurried rhythm of the journey. There is no rush along the Silk Road. A caravan might travel only 15 or 20 miles in a day, stopping while the sun is still high to make camp, to rest the animals, to prepare food and conduct small repairs. The journey from Chang'an to Samarkand alone covers more than 3,000 miles, and attempting to hurry would only exhaust both men and beasts. Long before the destination is reached, after several weeks of travel, the caravan enters the Gansu Corridor, one of the most strategically important geographic features along the entire Silk Road. This narrow strip of relatively fertile land, pinched between the Tibetan Plateau to the south and the Mongolian steppes to the north, serves as the only practical route between interior China and the vast deserts beyond. The corridor stretches for nearly 600 miles, a string of oasis towns connected by a road that follows the course of rivers flowing down from the snow-capped Kilian Mountains. These mountains rise to your left now, their peaks reaching heights of more than 16,000 feet, their slopes clothed in dark forests of spruce and fir that eventually give way to alpine meadows and permanent snow. The air here is thinner and colder than in the lowlands of Chang'an. At night, the temperatures drop sharply, and the travelers huddle around campfires, wrapped in thick felt blankets and furs. The stars above are brilliant and countless, unmarred by the smoke and lights of great cities, stretching from horizon to horizon in a dome of crystalline darkness. The first major stop along the Gansu corridor is the town of Lanzhou, positioned where the road crosses the Yellow River. This great waterway, carrier of vast quantities of silt that gives it the distinctive color from which it takes its name, flows through a narrow gorge here, its waters churning between steep cliffs of red and ochre rock. A ferry carries the caravan across, the camels nervous on the rocking boats, the merchants clutching their most precious goods close. The ferryman pilots his craft with a long pole, reading the currents with practiced skill, guiding his passengers safely to the far shore where the road continues westward. Beyond Lanzhou, the corridor narrows further and the landscape becomes increasingly arid. The grass-covered hills give way to rocky outcrops and gravel plains, with vegetation clinging only to the riverbanks and the irrigated fields around each oasis town. The wind blows constantly here, a dry wind carrying dust and the promise of the great deserts that lie ahead. Wu Wei appears after another week of travel, a modest but prosperous town surrounded by walls of packed earth. Here, the caravan rests for several days, replenishing supplies, replacing worn-out equipment, and adding new members for the dangerous stretch ahead. Wu Wei has served as a garrison town since the Han Dynasty first extended its control over the corridor, and Chinese soldiers patrol the streets in their leather armor, their presence a reminder that even here, far from the capital, the empire maintains its authority. The merchants conduct their business in the town's small market, trading some of their goods for provisions and information. Word passes among the traders about conditions ahead, which wells are reliable, which passes are clear of snow, which sections of the route have seen bandit activity. This intelligence, shared freely among the traveling community, can mean the difference between successful passage and disaster. Before we continue toward the Jade Gate, let us pause to experience more deeply the daily rhythms of caravan life along the Silk Road. For in understanding these rhythms, you will find a peace that mirrors the steady, unhurried progress of the ancient merchants, a meditation in motion that spans continents and centuries. The day begins in darkness, in those quiet hours before dawn when the stars still shine with crystalline brilliance in the cold desert sky. The caravan master rises first, checking the weather, examining the animals, consulting with his most experienced guides about the day's route. His movements are quiet and practiced, disturbing no one as he goes about his duties. Then the camp begins to stir. The cook kindles the morning fire from embers carefully preserved through the night, adding dry camel dung and the occasional precious stick of wood gathered from oasis towns. Soon the flame catches, casting dancing shadows against the felt walls of the tents, and the scent of tea begins to drift through the cold air. Tea is the universal beverage of the Silk Road, prepared differently in each region but valued everywhere for its warmth and stimulating properties. The Chinese merchants prefer their tea green and lightly steeped, served in delicate porcelain cups they carry carefully packed among their trade goods. The Sogdian traders drink it dark and strong, often mixed with salt and butter in the Central Asian style, a hearty brew that provides warmth and nourishment in a single cup. Breakfast is simple: flatbread baked the evening before, dried fruit from the oasis orchards, perhaps some hard cheese or dried meat for those who can afford it. The meal is eaten quickly, for there is much work to do before the caravan can move. The camels must be loaded, a task requiring considerable skill and experience. Each animal has its quirks. One refuses to kneel unless approached from the left, another will bite if his load is adjusted after he has risen, a third must be loaded last, or he will complain loudly enough to disturb the entire camp. The experienced handlers know each animal's personality and work accordingly, speaking softly, moving with calm deliberation, treating the beasts with the respect due to partners in a shared enterprise. The loads themselves require careful attention. Goods must be balanced precisely. Too much weight on one side will cause sores that can disable an animal for days. Fragile items must be protected from the jostling of travel. Goods intended for sale at the next stop must be accessible without unpacking the entire load. The merchants supervise this process closely, for their fortunes depend upon their goods arriving undamaged at distant markets. As the first light of dawn colors the eastern horizon, the caravan begins to move. The lead camel, usually a particularly reliable and experienced animal, sets the pace. Behind her, the others follow in a long line, each one tied to the pack saddle of the one ahead, forming a chain that can stretch for half a mile or more in a large caravan. The pace is slow by the standards of modern transportation, perhaps 2.5 miles per hour, maintained steadily hour after hour. The camel's broad, padded feet find purchase on sand and stone alike. Their steady rhythm becomes almost hypnotic, a gentle swaying that rocks their riders toward sleep, even in the harsh light of day. Feel that rhythm now carrying you deeper into relaxation. The soft padding of camel feet upon the ancient road, the creak of leather harnesses, the occasional clink of a bronze bell hung from a led animal's neck. These sounds have been the music of the Silk Road for centuries, and they can be your music now, a lullaby that stretches across continents. The merchants spend the traveling hours in various ways. Some conduct business discussions, negotiating future deals or settling accounts from previous transactions. Others practice their languages, for a successful Silk Road merchant must be able to communicate in at least 3 or 4 tongues. Some simply ride in silence, lost in their own thoughts, planning their strategies for markets still months of travel distant. The guards remain alert, scanning the surrounding terrain for any sign of danger. Bandits typically attack in the morning or evening hours, when the caravan is in motion, but the light is dim enough to offer concealment. The most dangerous sections of the route are well known, and extra vigilance is maintained in these areas. When the sun climbs high and the heat becomes oppressive, the caravan halts for the midday rest. Tents are erected to provide shade, water is distributed to people and animals alike, and a simple meal is prepared. This is the time for rest, for repairs, for the small tasks of daily life that cannot be accomplished while traveling. Some merchants take advantage of the midday halt to conduct business with local inhabitants, if any are present. Nomadic herders might bring fresh milk or meat to trade for manufactured goods. Farmers from nearby oases might offer vegetables and grain. These small transactions supplement the major commerce that occurs in the cities and provide welcome variety in the monotonous diet of travel. The animals rest in the shade of their own loads, chewing their cud, storing up energy for the afternoon march. Experienced camel drivers use this time to check their animals for injuries or illness, treating minor problems before they become serious. A stone caught in a footpad, a small sore under a strap, a hint of lameness in the gait. These minor issues, if ignored, can disable an animal and endanger the entire enterprise. As the afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, the caravan stirs again. The second march of the day is often the most pleasant, as the brutal midday heat gives way to more comfortable temperatures. The western sky begins its daily transformation, the harsh white light of noon softening to gold, and then to rose, and finally to the deep purple of approaching night. Camp is made while there is still light enough to work. A suitable location must be found, defensible if possible, sheltered from wind, close to water if water is available. The camels are unloaded and hobbled, allowed to graze on whatever vegetation they can find. Tents are erected, fires are kindled, and the evening meal is prepared. Dinner is the largest meal of the day, a time for gathering around the fire, for sharing stories and news, for the social interaction that makes caravan life bearable. The food is more substantial than breakfast, rice or noodles if supplies permit, supplemented with vegetables and dried or fresh meat. Tea flows freely, warming bodies that quickly grow cold in the desert night. After dinner, some merchants retire immediately to their tents, exhausted from the long day's travel. Others gather in small groups to talk, to play games, to pray according to their various faiths. The night watch is organized, volunteers taking turns to guard the sleeping camp against the human and animal predators that lurk in the darkness. And then silence falls, the deep silence of the desert night, broken only by the occasional cough of a camel or the distant cry of a wolf. The stars wheel overhead in their eternal patterns, the same patterns seen by Abraham and Confucius, by Alexander and Ashoka, by all the countless human beings who have lifted their eyes to the night sky in wonder. This is the rhythm that carries the Silk Road forward, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. In its steady repetition, there is a kind of peace, a surrender to patterns larger than any individual life, a recognition that some journeys can only be completed step by step, one camel footfall at a time. Let that rhythm carry you now, deeper into relaxation, deeper into peace. There is no hurry on the Silk Road. The destination will be reached in its own time. For now, there is only the journey, the steady progress westward, the ancient road stretching endlessly toward the setting sun. The road continues westward from Wuwei through Zhangye and Jiuquan, each town smaller and more isolated than the last. The landscape grows ever more stark, the mountains to the south crowned with permanent glaciers, the plains to the north fading into the endless grasslands of Mongolia. And then, after nearly 2 months of travel from Chang'an, the caravan approaches Dunhuang, the last major Chinese outpost before the road enters the most challenging terrain along its entire length. Dunhuang sits at the western end of the Gansu corridor, a surprisingly substantial town given its remote location. For Dunhuang serves a crucial function in the Silk Road network. It is the last place to gather supplies and information before entering the Taklamakan Desert, and the first refuge for those emerging from that deadly expanse. The town's markets are crowded with merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and adventurers from dozens of different lands. You hear Chinese and Sogdian, Sanskrit and Persian, and a dozen other languages you cannot identify. The goods on display represent the full range of Silk Road commerce. Chinese silk and lacquerware heading westward, glassware and woolen textiles from the Mediterranean heading east, spices and gems from India, furs from the northern steppes, and countless other commodities finding their way to distant markets. But Dunhuang is famous for more than its markets. Just outside the town, carved into the cliffs of a river valley, are the Mogao Caves, one of the greatest treasures of Buddhist art in the entire world. Hundreds of cave temples have been excavated from the soft rock, their interiors covered with painted murals and filled with sculpted figures of the Buddha and his attendants. Drift now through these sacred spaces, your spirit light as incense smoke rising toward painted ceilings. The murals glow in the flickering lamplight, scenes of the Buddha's life, of paradise realms filled with celestial musicians and dancers, of donors in the fashions of the Tang dynasty kneeling in prayer. Bodhisattvas with serene expressions and flowing robes cover every surface, their hands raised in gestures of blessing and teaching. These caves have been decorated over centuries by the devotion of merchants and pilgrims who stopped here on their journeys, commissioning artwork as prayer for safe passage through the dangers ahead. The paintings represent the finest artistic traditions of China, Central Asia, and India, blended together along this great highway of cultural exchange. Beyond Dunhuang, the road passes through the Jade Gate, the symbolic boundary between Chinese civilization and the vast unknown beyond. This ancient fortress, its walls crumbling now but still imposing, marks the point at which travelers leave the protection of the empire and enter lands where they must rely upon their own resources and the goodwill of foreign peoples. The caravan master Vakush gathers the travelers for a final briefing. His face is serious as he speaks, his words carrying the weight of experience gained across decades of travel. The desert ahead offers two routes, he explains. The northern route, skirting the edge of the Taklamakan along the base of the Tian Shan Mountains, and the southern route, following the foothills of the Kunlun Range. Neither is easy. Both demand absolute respect for the terrain, careful management of water supplies, and unwavering discipline from every member of the caravan. The group will take the northern route, Vakush announces. The wells along this path are more reliable in this season, and reports indicate that the southern oases have been troubled by disputes among local rulers. The merchants nod their acceptance. They have hired Vakush precisely for his judgment in such matters. As the caravan passes through the Jade Gate and into the lands beyond, feel yourself settling even deeper into relaxation. The rhythm of the journey has become part of you now. The gentle sway of the caravan's movement, the soft padding of camel feet upon sand and stone, the whispered conversations of merchants and the distant call of desert birds. You are leaving the known world behind, entering a realm of legend and wonder, where the very sands seem to whisper ancient secrets and the stars above are the same stars that guided travelers along these paths for 1,000 years before and will guide them for 1,000 years to come. The Taklamakan stretches before you now, a sea of sand covering more than 100,000 square miles, one of the largest and most inhospitable deserts on Earth. The name itself carries a warning in the Uyghur language. Place of no return, and countless travelers have perished within its boundaries, their bones scattered across dunes that shift and change with every wind. Yet the Silk Road must cross this forbidding expanse, for it lies directly in the path between China and the wealthy kingdoms of Central Asia. For more than 2,000 years, caravans have navigated this desert, following routes that connect a string of oasis towns clinging to the desert's edges, dependent on rivers flowing down from the surrounding mountains. The northern route that your caravan follows runs along the southern edge of the Tian Shan, the celestial mountains that form one of the great ranges of Central Asia. These peaks rise to heights exceeding 20,000 feet, their summits crowned with eternal snow, their glaciers feeding the rivers that make life possible in the oasis towns below. The first days beyond Dunhuang pass through a transitional landscape of gravel plains and sparse vegetation. The camels find occasional tufts of dry grass and thorny shrubs to supplement their carefully rationed fodder. Water is available from shallow wells that have been maintained by generations of travelers, their locations known to every experienced caravan master. But as the journey continues, the true desert begins. The gravel gives way to sand, endless undulating dunes that stretch to every horizon, their crests sharp against the brilliant blue sky, their colors shifting from gold to copper to deep rose as the sun moves across its daily arc. The heat during the day is punishing. The sand reflects and magnifies the sun's rays, creating temperatures that can exceed 120 degrees. The air shimmers and dances, producing mirages that taunt thirsty travelers with visions of water that dissolves upon approach. The merchants wrap their faces in cloth, protecting their skin from the burning sun and the stinging sand carried by the constant wind. And so the caravan travels primarily during the cooler hours of early morning and late evening, resting during the hottest part of the day beneath tents of felt and oiled cloth. The pattern becomes deeply rhythmic, breaking camp in the gray light before dawn, traveling until the sun climbs high, stopping to rest through the blazing afternoon, traveling again as the shadows lengthen, making camp after nightfall. Feel that rhythm now, like a lullaby carrying you deeper into peaceful rest. The slow padding of camel feet upon sand, the creak of leather harnesses, the whispered conversations of weary travelers, the eternal silence of the desert surrounding all human sounds. At night, the desert cold is surprising after the brutal heat of day. Temperatures can drop 40 degrees or more as the sun sets, and the travelers huddle around fires fueled by dried camel dung, the only available fuel in this treeless expanse. The stars above are impossibly bright, the Milky Way a glowing river across the heavens, familiar constellations hanging low on the horizon. The Sogdian merchants tell stories around these fires, tales of the desert spirits that haunt the dunes. They speak of travelers who wandered from the path, drawn by mysterious voices calling their names, and were never seen again. They tell of ghostly caravans glimpsed at a distance, of ancient cities buried beneath the sand, of strange lights that dance across the dunes on moonless nights. Whether these tales are true or merely invented to pass the long hours matters little. They serve a purpose, reminding travelers to stay close to the caravan, to never venture alone into the endless sand, to respect the desert's power and indifference to human life. Surviving the Taklamakan Desert requires knowledge accumulated over countless generations, wisdom passed from caravan master to apprentice, from experienced merchant to novice trader. This knowledge encompasses every aspect of travel: how to read the weather, how to manage water, how to care for animals, how to navigate by stars and landmarks in terrain that seems featureless to the untrained eye. Water management is perhaps the most critical skill. The human body requires several quarts of water daily in the desert heat, more if the traveler is physically active. Animals require even more. A camel might drink 30 gallons at a time, enough to sustain it for days or even weeks of travel, but at some point that water must be replenished. The wells along the northern route are spaced at intervals calculated by generations of experience. A typical day's travel covers between 15 and 20 miles, and wells are positioned accordingly. Some are natural springs, bubbling up from underground aquifers fed by distant mountain glaciers. Others are hand-dug, their depths sometimes reaching 100 feet or more to tap underground water sources. Still others are simply depressions where rainwater collects during the rare desert storms, lasting for weeks or months before evaporating. The caravan master knows each well by name, knows its typical condition at different seasons, knows its quirks and dangers. Some wells produce water so alkaline that it can sicken both people and animals if consumed in quantity. Others attract dangerous wildlife, wolves, wild boars, even occasional leopards that have learned to ambush prey at water sources. Still others are contested by local tribes who may demand payment for their use. Water discipline within the caravan is absolute. Each person receives a daily ration, calculated according to the distance to the next reliable source, the condition of the wells along the way, and the current season. Wasting water is considered a serious offense, for it endangers not only the wasteful individual, but the entire traveling party. The precious fluid is stored in leather bags and ceramic vessels, carefully protected from evaporation and contamination. Navigation in the desert presents its own challenges. The landscape seems featureless to newcomers, endless dunes of uniform color stretching to horizons that shimmer and dance in the heat. But experienced guides read this terrain like a book, noting subtle variations in color and texture, recognizing individual dunes by their shapes, following the paths of dry watercourses and the alignments of stone ridges. At night, the stars provide guidance. The pole star, fixed in its position while other stars wheel around it, indicates due north. The constellation patterns mark the seasons and help travelers maintain their direction through the long night marches that are sometimes necessary to avoid the worst of the daytime heat. The rising and setting positions of particular stars, carefully memorized, can indicate direction at any hour of the night. During the day, when stars are invisible, other methods must be used. The position of the sun indicates direction, of course, but its apparent movement across the sky must be accounted for. Experienced guides note the angle of shadows at different times of day, comparing observations to keep the caravan oriented. The prevailing wind direction, consistent for days or weeks at a time, provides another reference point. Sandstorms are among the greatest dangers of desert travel. These massive weather events can arise with little warning, reducing visibility to zero and pelting exposed skin with stinging particles. A severe sandstorm can last for days, burying anything left unprotected, disorienting travelers and scattering animals. When a sandstorm approaches, often signaled by a distinctive yellow-brown haze on the horizon and a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure that experienced travelers learn to sense, the caravan must take immediate precautions. Animals are made to kneel and are secured to prevent them from panicking and running. Goods are covered and anchored. People take shelter behind their kneeling camels or in hastily erected tents, covering their faces with cloth, closing their eyes, breathing through layers of fabric that filter the finest particles. There is nothing to do during a sandstorm but wait. The wind howls, sand whispers against every surface, the world shrinks to the small space immediately around each huddled figure. Time loses meaning. Some travelers pray, others simply endure, conserving energy, waiting for the storm to pass. When the wind finally dies and the air clears, the landscape may be transformed. Dunes have shifted position, trails have been erased, goods left unsecured have vanished beneath new deposits of sand. The caravan must reorient itself, checking direction, counting animals and people, assessing damage before the journey can resume. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke are constant threats during the summer months. The symptoms progress from mild discomfort to serious medical emergency. Dizziness, nausea, confusion, and eventually loss of consciousness and death. Experienced travelers recognize the early signs and take immediate action, seeking shade, consuming water, resting until recovery. The treatment of heat-related illness in the desert is limited by available resources. Cool water, if available, can be applied to the skin. The patient must be moved to shade and allowed to rest. But in severe cases, when the body's temperature regulation has completely failed, recovery may be impossible without resources that the desert cannot provide. Cold is an unexpected danger of desert travel, but it is very real. Night temperatures in the Taklamakan can drop below freezing, even in summer, and travelers who have been sweating through the day may find themselves shivering through the night. Hypothermia can develop insidiously, its early symptoms of confusion and poor judgment sometimes mistaken for simple fatigue. The caravan carries supplies for dealing with cold, thick felt blankets, fur-lined garments, materials for building fires. But fuel is scarce in the treeless desert, and fires must be used sparingly. The primary defense against cold is shared body heat, people sleeping close together, animals allowed to lie nearby, the combined warmth of the caravan community providing protection against the freezing night. These are the realities of Silk Road travel, the challenges that faced every merchant who ventured into the desert, the knowledge that had to be mastered for survival. As you drift deeper into relaxation, let your appreciation for these ancient skills deepen as well. The merchants who crossed the Taklamakan were not merely business people seeking profit. They were explorers and survivors, risking everything for the rewards that waited at distant markets. After several days of travel through the open desert, following a route marked only by occasional stone cairns and the instinct of experienced guides, the caravan approaches its first oasis since entering the Taklamakan. This is Hami, known as the gateway to the western regions, a town that has served as a crucial waypoint on the Silk Road for centuries. The first sign of the oasis is a change in the air, a faint hint of moisture, a suggestion of growing things that registers almost subconsciously after days of absolute dryness. Then the vegetation appears, at first just scattered tufts of grass and low shrubs, but becoming denser as you approach the town itself. And then the miracle of the oasis reveals itself fully. Groves of poplar and willow trees create welcome shade, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. Irrigation channels carry water from the nearby Tian Shan glaciers, feeding gardens and orchards that produce fruits of legendary sweetness. Hami melons in particular are famous throughout China for their flavor and fragrance, and merchants carry them carefully preserved as luxury gifts for distant recipients. The town itself is modest but substantial, its houses built of mud brick with flat roofs where families sleep during the hot summer nights. The streets are narrow and winding, providing shade and protection from the dust-laden winds. A bazaar occupies the town center, a covered market where local produce and handicrafts are traded alongside goods from the passing caravans. The caravan rests here for several days, allowing both people and animals to recover from the desert crossing. The camels are watered at stone troughs fed by ancient irrigation systems, their humps visibly plumping as they replenish their reserves. The merchants conduct business with local traders, exchanging some of their Chinese goods for provisions, fresh clothing, and replacement animals for those that have been lost or weakened during the journey. You drift through the oasis, observing the daily life that continues here regardless of the caravans passing through. Women in colorful embroidered dresses carry water in clay vessels balanced on their heads. Children play in the dusty lanes, their games and laughter the same as those of children everywhere. Old men sit in the shade of the tea house, smoking long pipes and discussing the news from distant places. The population here is mixed. Descendants of the original Tocharian inhabitants, whose Indo-European language and fair features once dominated the Tarim Basin, mingled with Chinese settlers, Sogdian merchants, and nomadic peoples from the surrounding steppes. This mixing of peoples, common throughout the Silk Road's length, has created unique cultures found nowhere else on Earth. Beyond Hami, the road continues westward, passing through a succession of similar oasis towns, each one a precious island of life in the vast desert sea. Turfan lies in a depression below sea level, famous for its heat, its grapes, and its ingenious underground irrigation channels called karez. These tunnels, some stretching for miles, carry mountain water beneath the desert's surface, preventing evaporation and delivering life-giving moisture to the fields and gardens above. Kucha was once the seat of a powerful kingdom, its rulers patrons of Buddhism and the arts. The cave temples near the city contain paintings and sculptures that blend Indian, Persian, and Chinese influences into a style found nowhere else. Monks here have spent centuries translating Buddhist scriptures, creating the texts that will spread the Dharma throughout East Asia. Aksu and Kashgar lie ahead, each with its own character and history, each offering refuge and resupply to the endless stream of caravans moving along the route. The journey through the Taklamakan is measured not in miles but in oases, the spaces between them are mere obstacles to be endured, while the towns themselves are the true landmarks of progress. After weeks of travel through the desert, the caravan approaches Kashgar, one of the most important cities along the entire Silk Road. Located at the western edge of the Tarim Basin, where routes from China, India, and Central Asia converge, Kashgar has been a meeting point of civilizations for more than 2,000 years. The approach to the city reveals the dramatic change in landscape that marks this region. The flat desert gives way to rolling foothills, and beyond them rise the stupendous peaks of the Pamirs, the roof of the world, where several of Asia's greatest mountain ranges come together in a knot of stone and ice. Kashgar itself occupies a fertile valley watered by streams flowing down from these mountains. The surrounding fields grow wheat and cotton. Orchards produce apricots and almonds, and the climate supports agriculture that seems almost miraculous after the barrenness of the desert crossing. The city's famous Sunday market draws traders from hundreds of miles in every direction. On this day, the population of the city doubles or triples as merchants, farmers, and craftspeople converge to conduct business. The market grounds sprawl across a vast area, divided into sections for different categories of goods. In one area, livestock is traded, fat-tailed sheep prized for their rich meat, sturdy horses from the mountain pastures, donkeys and mules for transport. The air fills with the sounds and smells of animals, the shouts of buyers and sellers, the bleating and braying and whinnying of countless beasts. Another section displays textiles, silks from China, woolens from Persia, cotton from India, and the locally produced atlas fabric with its distinctive ikat patterns of brilliant color. Carpets are stacked in great piles, their geometric designs representing traditions stretching back centuries, their wool dyed in rich shades of red and blue and gold. The spice market overwhelms the senses with fragrance. Mountains of saffron and cinnamon, peppercorns and cardamom are measured out on bronze scales and wrapped in paper packages. These precious commodities have traveled from the distant Malabar coast of India, from the spice islands of Southeast Asia, from Ceylon and Sumatra, bound eventually for kitchens in Chang'an and Rome. The metalworkers section rings with the sound of hammers on copper and bronze as craftsmen shape vessels and trays with intricate hammered designs. Jewelers display semi-precious stones from the mountains, lapis lazuli of deep celestial blue, turquoise, carnelian, and jade, along with worked silver and gold, pearls from the Persian Gulf, and coral from the Mediterranean. And everywhere there are tea houses where merchants gather to negotiate and socialize, their conversations conducted in the lingua franca of trade, a mixture of languages and gestures that serves for communication even between people who share no common tongue. Drift now through this kaleidoscope of humanity, this convergence of cultures at the crossroads of the world. The faces around you represent every corner of the known earth. Chinese merchants with their characteristic top knots, Sogdian traders with their pointed caps and flowing robes, Indians with their turbans and tilak marks, Arabs in their white cotton garments, pale-skinned Tocharians with their blue eyes and red hair, dark-skinned travelers from Africa, and countless others whose origins you cannot guess. This is the miracle of the Silk Road, not merely the exchange of goods, but the meeting of peoples, the sharing of ideas, the blending of cultures that has enriched every civilization it touches. The route serves as a conduit for religion and philosophy, for science and technology, for art and music, for languages and customs, creating connections between societies that would otherwise remain unknown to each other. Before we continue to the mountain crossing, let us take time to appreciate the full range of goods that moved along the Silk Road, for these commodities represent not merely commercial transactions, but the exchange of human creativity across civilizations. From China flowed the most famous product of the Silk Road, silk itself, in all its varieties and forms. Raw silk came in great bales, the threads not yet woven, ready to be processed by craftsmen at any point along the route. Woven silk appeared in countless forms: light gauzes for summer clothing, heavy brocades for formal occasions, embroidered ceremonial fabrics, and practical everyday textiles. The colors of Chinese silk astonished Western observers. Scarlet dyed with Kermes insects, deep purple from murex shells traded from the Mediterranean but processed in Chinese workshops, brilliant yellows and greens from plant dyes perfected over centuries. These colors remained fast through wear and washing, a technical achievement that Roman dyers could not match. Beyond silk, China exported lacquerware, boxes and trays, cups and containers coated with dozens of layers of tree sap that hardened into a surface as smooth as glass and as durable as metal. The lacquer was carved or painted with intricate designs, often inlaid with mother-of-pearl or gold leaf, creating objects of extraordinary beauty that commanded premium prices in every market along the route. Porcelain began its journey westward during the Han Dynasty, though it would become even more important in later centuries. These ceramic vessels, fired at temperatures far exceeding anything Western potters could achieve, were prized for their strength, their translucency, and their pure white color that provided a perfect background for painted decoration. Bronze mirrors were another Chinese export, their backs cast with elaborate designs while their fronts were polished to high reflectivity. These mirrors were valued not only for practical use but as ritual objects buried with the dead to provide light in the afterlife. Paper traveled the Silk Road, though its manufacture remained a Chinese secret for centuries. The thin sheets, so much lighter and more practical than the clay tablets, papyrus scrolls, and parchment used elsewhere, revolutionized record-keeping and correspondence wherever they appeared. From India came spices that transformed the cuisines of every civilization that encountered them. Pepper was perhaps the most important, both black pepper from the Malabar coast and long pepper from Southeast Asia. These pungent seeds added flavor to bland foods and served as preservatives that extended the storage life of meat and other perishables. Cinnamon and cassia came from the forests of Ceylon and southern China, their aromatic bark used in cooking, medicine, and religious ritual. Cardamom from the hill countries of India added its distinctive flavor to both sweet and savory dishes. Cloves and nutmeg from the distant Spice Islands reached the Silk Road through maritime connections, eventually making their way to tables in Chang'an and Rome alike. Indian cotton textiles were highly valued throughout the ancient world. The finest Indian muslins were so light and transparent that Roman moralists complained of their impropriety, while heavier cotton fabrics provided practical clothing better suited to hot climates than wool or linen. Diamonds and other precious stones from Indian mines found their way along the Silk Road to adorn the wealthy of every civilization. Indian techniques for cutting and polishing gemstones were more advanced than anything known in the West, and Indian finished stones commanded premium prices. From Persia came carpets of legendary quality, their wool dyed in rich colors, their patterns encoding symbolic meanings that viewers learned to read. These carpets were not merely floor coverings but status symbols, diplomatic gifts, and family treasures passed down through generations. Persian horses were prized throughout the ancient world, larger and stronger than most other breeds, capable of carrying armored riders into battle. The cavalry traditions of Persia influenced military thinking from China to Europe, and Persian horse training techniques spread along the same routes as other forms of knowledge. Silver and gold from Persian mines, worked into jewelry, vessels, and coins, provided both trade goods and currency for Silk Road commerce. Persian metalworkers were renowned for their skill, producing objects that combined technical excellence with sophisticated artistic design. From the Mediterranean world came glass, vessels for drinking, containers for storage, beads for decoration. Roman glassblowing techniques produced objects of delicacy and beauty unknown in China, where glass remained primarily a rare and expensive import rather than a domestic product. Wine and olive oil traveled eastward in sealed amphorae, their contents prized by wealthy consumers who had developed a taste for Mediterranean cuisine. These bulky liquids were expensive to transport but commanded prices that justified the effort. Woolen textiles from Roman workshops found markets throughout the East, their weight and warmth valued in colder regions, their colors and patterns offering alternatives to local production. Coral from the Mediterranean was highly prized in India and China, where it was used for jewelry and religious objects. The red branches of Mediterranean coral, traded from Roman hands through Persian merchants to Indian and Chinese buyers, became symbols of wealth and devotion far from the seas where they had grown. Amber from the Baltic shores reached the Silk Road through northern trade routes, its warm golden color and electrical properties fascinating to consumers throughout the ancient world. Greek philosophers had studied amber's ability to attract small objects when rubbed, giving us the word electricity from the Greek elektron, meaning amber. Furs from the forests of Siberia and northern China traveled southward to warm the wealthy of more temperate regions. Sable and mink, ermine and fox were luxuries that marked their wearers as people of wealth and status. These goods and countless others, ivory and incense, medicinal herbs and musical instruments, books and art objects, animals both living and preserved, created a river of commerce that flowed in both directions along the Silk Road, enriching every society it touched. West of Kashgar, the Silk Road faces its greatest geographic challenge. The Pamir Mountains rise like a wall across the path, their peaks reaching heights of more than 23,000 feet, their passes choked with snow for much of the year. This is the roof of the world, the place where the Himalaya, Karakoram, Hindu Kush, Kunlun, and Tian Shan mountain ranges converge in a wilderness of stone and ice. Several routes cross this formidable barrier, each with its own difficulties and dangers. The most common path follows the Karakoram Highway through the mountains of what is now northern Pakistan, descending eventually toward the Indus River Valley and the rich lands of the Indian subcontinent. This was the route by which Buddhism first entered Central Asia, carried by monks and missionaries across passes that seemed to touch the very heavens. Another route, the one your caravan will follow, leads northwest toward the Fergana Valley, avoiding the highest peaks but still requiring passage through terrain that would daunt all but the most determined travelers. The caravan master Vakush knows these mountains well, has crossed them in every season, and his guidance is essential for safe passage. He times the departure from Kashgar to arrive at the high passes during the brief summer window when the snow has melted enough to allow passage. The road climbs steadily from the fertile valley floor, following the course of mountain streams that grow smaller and colder as the altitude increases. The vegetation changes with elevation. The orchards and grain fields give way to alpine meadows dotted with wildflowers, then to sparse grass and low shrubs, then finally to bare rock and snow. The air becomes thin and cold, and many of the travelers experience the sickness of altitude, headaches, nausea, shortness of breath. The caravan moves slowly, allowing time for adjustment, stopping frequently to rest both people and animals. Some of the camels, bred for desert conditions, struggle with the cold and the steep terrain, and several are exchanged for yaks obtained from local herders. These remarkable animals, with their long shaggy coats and massive horns, are perfectly adapted to the mountain environment. They can carry heavy loads at altitudes where horses and camels falter, their broad hooves finding purchase on steep and rocky trails. The local people who tend these herds live permanently at elevations that leave lowland visitors gasping for breath, their bodies adapted over generations to the thin mountain air. Feel the cold mountain air on your face now, clean and sharp as crystal, carrying the scent of snow and stone. The sky above is a deep cobalt blue, darker than any sky you have ever seen at lower elevations, the stars visible even in daylight if you look carefully enough. The silence is profound, broken only by the wind whistling through rocky passes and the occasional cry of a lammergeier circling on the updrafts. The pass itself, when finally reached, seems to pierce the very boundary between earth and heaven. Glaciers gleam on either side, their ancient ice creaking and groaning with slow movements measured in centuries. The trail has been worn into the rock by countless generations of travelers, their passage leaving a visible mark upon the stone. Prayer flags flutter from cairns at the highest point, placed here by Buddhist and pre-Buddhist travelers as offerings for safe passage. The colors, blue for sky, white for cloud, red for fire, green for water, yellow for earth, have faded in the harsh mountain sun, but new flags are added by each passing caravan, a continuous tradition linking travelers across centuries. From this height, the view extends for hundreds of miles in every direction. Mountain ranges march toward every horizon, their snow-covered peaks like frozen waves upon a vast ocean. The kingdoms and cities below are invisible from this elevation, hidden in valleys that seem impossibly distant, impossibly green and warm, compared to this realm of stone and ice. But the descent awaits, and with it the promise of warmth and plenty. The western slope of the Pamirs leads down toward the Fergana Valley, one of the richest agricultural regions in Central Asia, a land of cotton fields and orchards, of ancient cities and thriving markets. The caravan begins its descent, moving carefully on trails that have been carved from cliff sides, crossing bridges of braided rope and wooden planks that span roaring mountain torrents. The journey downward takes several days, but with each passing hour, the air grows warmer and thicker, the vegetation reappears, and the harsh beauty of the high mountains gives way to gentler landscapes. The Fergana Valley opens before you now, a vast green bowl surrounded by snow-capped mountains, watered by the Sirdarya River and its countless tributaries. This is one of the agricultural jewels of Central Asia, a region of cotton fields and vineyards, of orchards heavy with fruit and pastures thick with grass. It was the horses of this valley that first drew Chinese attention to the lands beyond the desert, more than 2 centuries before the time of your journey. The Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty, hearing tales of the magnificent horses of Fergana, horses so fine that they were said to sweat blood when exerted, sent expedition after expedition to obtain them for his cavalry. These legendary steeds, larger and stronger than Chinese horses, became prized throughout the empire and helped establish the trade connections that would eventually become the Silk Road. The horses are still bred here in pastures rich with mountain grass, their bloodlines carefully maintained by breeders whose families have been raising them for generations. You see them now, galloping across the green meadows, their coats gleaming in the sunlight, bay and chestnut, black and gray, with the distinctive muscular build and high-stepping gait that made them famous throughout the ancient world. The blood-sweating phenomenon that so impressed the ancient Chinese is actually caused by a parasite found in the local waters, which creates small subcutaneous hemorrhages during exertion. But this explanation would not be understood for many centuries yet, and the mystique of the heavenly horses continues to surround the breed. The caravan passes through a succession of towns and cities in the Fergana Valley, each one a substantial settlement with its own character and specialties. The region has been fought over by empires for thousands of years. Persians and Greeks, nomadic confederations, and Chinese armies have all sought to control this wealthy and strategic territory. The people here speak a Sogdian dialect, related to Persian, and practice a blend of religions that reflects the region's position at the crossroads of civilizations. There are Zoroastrian fire temples where priests maintain sacred flames that have burned for centuries. There are Buddhist monasteries and stupas containing relics of holy monks. There are shrines to local deities whose worship predates recorded history. And there are, increasingly, mosques where the faithful answer the call to prayer. For Islam is spreading along the Silk Road, carried by Arab merchants and missionaries, and will eventually become the dominant faith throughout Central Asia. The markets of the Fergana cities display goods from throughout the Silk Road network. Chinese silk and porcelain share space with Indian spices and textiles. Glassware from the Roman Empire, transported across thousands of miles, catches the light alongside locally produced pottery. Furs from the northern forests, precious stones from distant mines, metals worked into weapons and jewelry, all find buyers and sellers in these busy bazaars. West of the Fergana Valley, the road descends into the great Zaravshan River Valley, where lies one of the most magnificent cities of the ancient world. Samarkand, ancient and proud, has been called the Golden City, the Pearl of the East, the Garden of the Soul, and none of these names does justice to its splendor. The city has been a center of civilization for nearly 3,000 years, ruled by a succession of peoples and empires. Alexander the Great paused here during his conquest of the Persian Empire, remarking that its beauty exceeded all reports. Centuries later, Samarkand would become the capital of Tamerlane's empire and would be adorned with monuments that still inspire wonder today. But in the time of your journey, centuries before Tamerlane, Samarkand is already a wealthy and cosmopolitan metropolis, the commercial heart of the Sogdian trading network that spans the entire Silk Road. The Sogdian merchants based here have established communities in every major city from Chang'an to Constantinople. Their trading houses and money-changing operations forming the financial infrastructure of transcontinental commerce. The approach to Samarkand reveals the city's grandeur gradually. First, the surrounding fields and orchards appear, irrigated by an ancient system of canals that transforms the semi-arid steppe into productive farmland. Then the walls emerge from the horizon, massive fortifications of mud, brick, and stone that have withstood countless sieges. And finally, the city itself comes into view. Domes and minarets, palaces and markets, crowded streets and quiet gardens spread across a series of gentle hills above the river. The caravan enters through the eastern gate, passing beneath a towered archway decorated with blue and turquoise tiles that catch the sunlight. The main bazaar lies ahead, a vast covered market that stretches for hundreds of meters, its vaulted ceiling allowing light to filter down through high windows while keeping the interior cool even during the hottest summer days. The merchants scatter to conduct their business, visiting factors and money changers, negotiating sales and purchases, arranging for the storage and transport of goods. The Chinese silk that has traveled all the way from Chang'an commands premium prices here. But the merchants are reluctant to sell everything at once. The best profits await in the markets of Persia and beyond. Let yourself wander through Samarkand now, your spirit light and unencumbered, exploring this crossroads of the world. Here is a caravanserai, one of dozens in the city, where traveling merchants find lodging and stabling for their animals. The courtyard echoes with the sounds of commerce, the braying of donkeys, the complaints of camels, the calls of vendors selling food and drink, the murmur of deals being negotiated in a dozen languages. Here is the paper-making quarter, where skilled craftsmen produce sheets of fine paper using techniques learned from Chinese prisoners captured in a battle decades ago. This knowledge, spread along the Silk Road, will eventually transform the Islamic world, and, from there, Europe itself, making books and literacy available far more widely than ever before. Here is a workshop where glassblowers practice their craft, producing vessels of remarkable delicacy and beauty. The techniques of glassmaking have traveled from the Roman world along the Silk Road, and the craftsmen of Samarkand have added their own innovations, creating styles that will be traded back toward both East and West. And here is a library attached to a great madrasa where scholars study texts collected from throughout the known world. Manuscripts in Arabic, Persian, Greek, Sanskrit, and Chinese fill the shelves, their contents being translated and discussed by learned men who see no contradiction between the wisdom traditions of different civilizations. This openness to knowledge from all sources characterizes the best of Silk Road culture and will one day contribute to the golden age of Islamic science and philosophy. The caravanserai where the caravan stays offers comfortable quarters, small private rooms surrounding a central courtyard with stabling for animals and storage space for goods. The food is excellent by the standards of the road. Fresh bread baked in clay ovens, lamb grilled over charcoal, rice pilaf fragrant with saffron and raisins, fruit from the local orchards. The caravan will remain in Samarkand for nearly 2 weeks, conducting business, resting from the long journey already completed, and preparing for the even longer journey that lies ahead. Some of the original travelers from Chang'an will sell their goods here and return eastward with different merchandise. Others will continue westward toward Persia and the Mediterranean, drawn by the promise of even greater profits in distant markets. As the days pass in Samarkand, feel yourself drifting deeper into the golden peace of this ancient city. The calls of muezzins blend with the chanting of Buddhist monks. The scent of cooking fires mingles with incense from temples and perfume from noble houses. The sounds of commerce and conversation create a constant low murmur, punctuated by the laughter of children and the singing of birds in garden courtyards. This is the heart of the Silk Road, the place where East meets West, where goods and ideas and people from throughout the known world come together in an exchange that enriches all who participate. Let its ancient peace settle over you now, calming your thoughts, deepening your rest, carrying you gently toward the shores of sleep. Beyond Samarkand, the Silk Road continues westward across the vast Central Asian steppes, a sea of grass that stretches to the horizon in every direction. This is the domain of nomadic peoples, horse-riding warriors whose names echo through history, Scythians and Sarmatians, Huns and Turks, Mongols and countless others who have risen to power and faded away across the centuries. The caravan, now smaller than when it left Chang'an, moves cautiously across this landscape. The threat of banditry is ever present, for the nomadic tribes of the steppe have long supplemented their herding economy with raids on passing caravans. The guards ride with weapons ready, their eyes scanning the endless grassland for any sign of approaching horsemen. But the steppe is also a place of stark beauty, and you drift through it now with the peaceful detachment of a dream. The grass ripples in the wind like waves upon an ocean, changing color with the light. Silver in the early morning, gold at noon, purple and rose at sunset. Wild horses run free across the plains, their manes streaming, their hooves thundering on the hard-packed earth. Eagles circle high overhead, their sharp eyes searching for prey. The nomadic peoples who live here have developed a way of life perfectly adapted to this environment. Their round felt tents, called yurts, can be assembled and disassembled in hours, allowing them to follow their herds across vast distances in search of fresh pasture. Their diet consists largely of meat and dairy products from their animals. Fermented mare's milk, hard cheese that can last for months, dried meat that provides sustenance during the harsh winters. Some of these nomads are friendly to travelers, offering hospitality in exchange for news from distant lands and small gifts of trade goods. The caravan master knows which tribes are welcoming and which are dangerous, and he guides the caravan accordingly, sometimes paying tribute for safe passage, sometimes avoiding certain territories entirely. After many days of travel across the steppe, the landscape begins to change. The endless grass gives way to more arid terrain, and in the distance, the Persian highlands rise against the western sky. The caravan approaches Merv, one of the great oasis cities of Central Asia, located at a crucial junction where multiple Silk Road routes converge. Merv is an ancient city, already more than 2,000 years old at the time of your journey. It has been the capital of empires and the seat of learning, a center of commerce and a fortress against invasion. The walls that surround it are massive and multiple, a series of fortifications built by successive generations to protect this vital oasis. Within these walls, you find a city that rivals Samarkand in wealth and sophistication. There are palaces and gardens, libraries and workshops, bazaars and caravanserais. The population is diverse: Persians and Arabs, Turks and Sogdians, and merchants from throughout the known world. The languages you hear reflect this diversity, along with the religions practiced in the city's many temples and shrines. West of Merv, the road enters the Persian heartland, passing through territories that have been ruled by Persian-speaking peoples for millennia. The Sasanian Empire, which governs these lands in the time of your journey, claims descent from the ancient Achaemenid dynasty of Darius and Xerxes, and maintains a sophisticated civilization that rivals Rome in its achievements. The cities of Persia are magnificent, their architecture reflecting a long tradition of monumental construction. Mud brick walls give way to stone and fired brick, decorated with carved reliefs depicting kings and nobles, soldiers and priests. Gardens are laid out according to formal geometric patterns, fed by elaborate irrigation systems that transform the desert into green paradise. The Persian concept of the garden, the paradisa, from which our English word paradise derives, represents the highest ideals of Persian civilization. These enclosed spaces, carefully planted with fragrant flowers and fruit-bearing trees, cooled by flowing water and shaded by graceful pavilions, offered respite from the harsh climate and symbolized the order that Persian kings sought to impose upon the chaos of the natural world. Walking through a Persian garden is a sensory experience unlike any other. The air is heavy with the scent of roses and jasmine, of ripe apricots and fermenting grapes. The sound of water is everywhere. Fountains splashing, channels gurgling, the wind rustling through leaves that overhang reflecting pools. Songbirds call from the branches, their melodies mingling with the distant sounds of the city beyond the garden walls. The pathways are laid out in geometric patterns, usually organized around a central axis that leads the eye toward a focal point. Perhaps a pavilion, perhaps a reflecting pool, perhaps a particularly magnificent tree. Smaller paths branch off at right angles, creating a grid that can be explored without ever losing one's sense of orientation. Benches and platforms offer places to rest and contemplate, to enjoy the beauty that human hands have created from raw nature. These gardens represent tremendous investments of labor and resources, for water in the Persian highlands is scarce and must be carefully managed. Underground channels called qanats carry water from distant mountain sources, sometimes for distances of many miles, delivering moisture to gardens that would otherwise wither in the dry heat. The engineers who design and maintain these systems are among the most respected professionals in Persian society. The Persian religion, Zoroastrianism, dominates the cultural landscape. Fire temples dot the countryside, their sacred flames maintained by priests who keep the fires burning day and night, year after year, century after century. These flames represent Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of the Zoroastrian faith, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness, truth and falsehood that defines the cosmic order. The teachings of Zoroaster, the ancient prophet who founded this faith perhaps 3,000 years before the time of your journey, emphasize the importance of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Humans are understood to be soldiers in a cosmic battle between the forces of good and evil, and each individual's choices contribute to the ultimate outcome of this struggle. Death is not the end, but rather a transition to judgment, where the soul's accumulated deeds are weighed and its eternal fate determined. The Zoroastrian priests, called magi, are respected figures in Persian society. They perform rituals at births and deaths, marriages and festivals, maintaining traditions that stretch back thousands of years. Their white robes and distinctive headgear mark them as servants of the sacred fire, intermediaries between the human world and the divine. The influence of Zoroastrianism extends far beyond the boundaries of the Persian Empire. The concept of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, the expectation of a final judgment, the belief in angels and demons, these ideas have influenced Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, traveling along the same networks of exchange that carry silk and spices. The route through Persia follows an ancient infrastructure that predates the Silk Road itself. The Persian Royal Road, built by Darius the Great in the 5th century before our era, connected the major cities of the Persian Empire and remained in use for centuries after the empire itself had fallen. This road was designed not primarily for commerce but for communication, to allow messages to travel quickly from the capital to distant provinces, and to move troops rapidly to wherever they were needed. Relay stations were positioned at intervals of about 15 miles, each one staffed with fresh horses and riders who could carry urgent messages at speeds averaging nearly 200 miles per day. The system was so efficient that the Greek historian Herodotus famously described it. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor darkness of night prevents these couriers from completing their designated stages with utmost speed. This phrase, adopted centuries later as the unofficial motto of the United States Postal Service, testifies to the enduring reputation of Persian efficiency. For merchants and other travelers, the Royal Road offered security and convenience. The road surface was maintained by royal decree, with provincial governors held responsible for conditions in their territories. Way stations offered food, lodging, and fresh animals for those who could afford them. Guards patrolled the route, suppressing banditry and ensuring that tolls were collected properly. The caravan follows this road westward through city after city as it crosses the Persian plateau. Nishapur with its turquoise mines, Ray with its silk workshops, Hamadan perched on its mountain slopes. Each city offers opportunities for trade, and the merchants conduct business at every stop, exchanging goods and adjusting their loads according to the changing markets. Nishapur is famous throughout the Islamic world for its turquoise, the distinctive blue-green stone that Persian craftsmen work into jewelry and decorative objects of exceptional beauty. The mines have been worked for thousands of years, and the finest stones command prices that rival gemstones of equal rarity. The caravan merchants examine the offerings carefully, selecting stones that will appeal to buyers in distant markets. Ray is an ancient city, one of the oldest in Persia, with a history stretching back to the earliest days of Iranian civilization. The city's workshops produce silk textiles that combine Chinese raw materials with Persian designs, creating fabrics that are distinctive to this region. These textiles will sell well in both Eastern and Western markets, for they represent a fusion of traditions that appeals to sophisticated consumers. Hamadan, the ancient Ecbatana, served as the summer capital of the Median kings before Persia rose to dominance. Its high elevation offers relief from the summer heat that oppresses the lowlands, and wealthy Persians have built villas here where they retreat during the hottest months. The city's markets are smaller than those of the major commercial centers, but they offer opportunities for those who know what to look for. After many weeks of travel through the Persian highlands, the caravan descends toward the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, the fertile plain known since ancient times as Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. Here, where human civilization first emerged thousands of years ago, lies Ctesiphon, the capital of the Sasanian Persian Empire. The approach to Ctesiphon reveals a city of unprecedented scale and grandeur. The Tigris River flows past its walls, providing water for irrigation and transport, cooling breezes in the hot summer months, and a natural defense against attackers. The city spreads across both banks of the river, connected by bridges of stone and brick. The most impressive structure in Ctesiphon is the Takht Khazra, the great audience hall of the Sasanian kings. This massive vaulted hall, built of fired brick without any scaffolding, spans more than 80 feet and rises to a height of more than 100 feet, the largest single-span arch in the ancient world. The construction techniques required to build such a structure represent engineering achievements that will not be matched in Europe for more than 1,000 years. Inside the Takht Khazra, the King of Kings receives ambassadors and petitioners, surrounded by courtiers in elaborate robes, soldiers in gleaming armor, priests in their distinctive white vestments. The throne itself is said to be surrounded by mechanisms that make it appear to rise and fall, adding to the supernatural awe with which visitors regard the Persian monarch. The bazaars of Ctesiphon display the wealth of a great empire. Goods from throughout the Persian realm and beyond fill the stalls. Carpets and textiles, metalwork and jewelry, spices and perfumes, weapons and armor. The currency of the realm, silver drachms stamped with the image of the king, changes hands constantly as merchants conduct their business. The caravan will spend considerable time in Ctesiphon, for this is a major endpoint for Silk Road trade. Some of the merchants who have traveled all the way from China will go no further, selling their goods here and using the proceeds to purchase Persian and Roman merchandise for the return journey. Others will continue westward, seeking the markets of the Roman Empire or the ports of the eastern Mediterranean. Rest here now in the shadow of the Great Arch, letting the sounds of the ancient city wash over you. The call to prayer echoes from newly built mosques, for Islam is beginning to spread even to the Persian heartland. The chanting of Zoroastrian priests mingles with the bells of Christian churches, for significant communities of both faiths exist within the city walls. The languages you hear include Persian and Arabic, Greek and Aramaic, along with the commercial languages of the Silk Road trading communities. This is the western anchor of the Asian portion of the Silk Road, the point where Eastern goods meet Western markets, where the traditions of China and India encounter those of Persia and Rome. Beyond lies another world entirely, the Mediterranean civilization of the Roman Empire, with its own ancient traditions and modern achievements. Those merchants who continue westward from Ctesiphon face the crossing of a contested frontier. The Persian and Roman empires have been rivals for centuries, their armies clashing repeatedly along the borders that separate their realms. The territory between the Euphrates and the Roman provinces of Syria can be dangerous, especially in times of active warfare. But commerce has its own imperatives, and trade continues even when empires are at odds. Merchants have arrangements with officials on both sides, paying duties and bribes to smooth their passage across the frontier. The goods they carry, silk and spices, gems and glassware, are too valuable for either empire to suppress entirely, and the taxes collected on Silk Road trade provide significant revenue for both Persian and Roman treasuries. The caravan crosses the Euphrates at a recognized crossing point, submitting to inspection by Persian customs officials who assess duties on the goods being exported. The process is time-consuming but generally peaceful, for the officials understand that fair treatment encourages trade, while excessive extraction drives merchants to seek other routes. Beyond the river, the landscape becomes drier and more austere. This is the Syrian desert, a vast expanse of sand and rock that separates Mesopotamia from the Mediterranean coast. The caravan follows a route marked by wells and occasional oasis settlements, moving carefully through territory where bandits and hostile tribes pose constant threats. After several days of desert travel, the caravan reaches Palmyra, one of the most remarkable cities of the ancient world. Rising from the harsh desert landscape like a mirage made real, Palmyra has built its wealth entirely on Silk Road trade, serving as the essential link between the caravan routes of the East and the shipping lanes of the Mediterranean. The city is laid out along a spectacular colonnaded main street, more than a mile in length, lined with columns of golden limestone that glow in the desert sun. Temples and public buildings rise on either side, their architecture blending Greek, Roman, and Middle Eastern traditions into something entirely unique. The theater can seat thousands for performances and public gatherings. The baths offer Roman-style luxury in the heart of the desert. The marketplace hums with the commerce that has made Palmyra wealthy. The merchants of Palmyra are famous throughout the ancient world for their business acumen. They have established trading houses in ports across the Mediterranean, in Persian cities and Indian markets, maintaining a commercial network that spans the entire known world. Their wealth is displayed in elaborate tomb towers outside the city walls, where the successful merchant families house their dead in splendor that rivals the monuments of kings. The caravan will rest in Palmyra while new arrangements are made for the final leg of the journey. The desert crossing complete, goods can now be transported westward by more efficient means, by ship along the coast, or by well-maintained Roman roads through the provinces of Syria and beyond. West of Palmyra, the caravan enters the Roman Empire, passing through territories that have been under Roman rule for more than 2 centuries. The change is immediately apparent in the infrastructure. Paved roads that allow rapid movement of goods and troops, bridges that span rivers and gorges, milestones that mark distances to major cities. The first major Roman city encountered is Antioch, one of the largest cities in the empire, capital of the province of Syria. Founded by one of Alexander the Great's generals more than 4 centuries earlier, Antioch has grown into a metropolis of perhaps 500,000 inhabitants, a center of commerce, administration, and culture. The city's markets offer goods from throughout the Roman world and beyond. There are woolen textiles from Asia Minor, glassware from Egyptian workshops, wine and olive oil from Italy and Greece, metals from Spain and Britain, grains from Egypt and North Africa. And there are the Eastern goods that have traveled the length of the Silk Road: Chinese silk, Indian spices, Central Asian gems, Persian metalwork. The Roman appetite for silk is seemingly insatiable. The fabric has become essential for the wardrobes of the wealthy, and even middle-class Romans aspire to own at least a few silk garments. The Senate has repeatedly passed laws attempting to limit silk consumption, particularly by men, but these laws have had little effect. The demand drives the trade, and the trade enriches everyone along the route. The silk sold in Roman markets has often been reworked by the time it reaches consumers. The heavy Chinese brocades are too warm for Mediterranean climates, and Roman weavers unravel the original fabric and reweave the threads into lighter, gauze-like textiles better suited to local tastes. This reworking process, while adding to the cost, allows Roman manufacturers to create finished goods that command even higher prices. From Antioch, goods travel by various routes to their final destinations. Ships carry cargoes to ports throughout the Mediterranean, to Alexandria in Egypt, to Rome and its harbor at Ostia, to Carthage and Hispania, to the cities of Greece and the Black Sea coast. Roads connect the Syrian coast to the interior provinces, allowing overland transport to Asia Minor, to Greece, and to the Danube frontier. Many of the most precious Silk Road goods find their way eventually to Alexandria, the great Egyptian port that has been a center of world commerce since its founding by Alexander the Great, more than 4 centuries before the time of your journey. Alexandria occupies an ideal position for Mediterranean trade, situated at the mouth of the Nile. River with access to both the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea routes to India. The city serves as a clearinghouse for goods from east and west, a manufacturing center where raw materials are transformed into finished products, and a financial hub where the complex transactions of international commerce are negotiated. The famous lighthouse of Alexandria, the Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, guides ships into the harbor from far out at sea. Its great beacon fire, reflected and magnified by bronze mirrors, is visible for 30 miles or more, a symbol of the city's role as a guiding light for maritime commerce. The lighthouse rises in 3 stages from its island base: the lowest square, the middle octagonal, the highest cylindrical, the whole standing more than 300 feet tall. At night, the fire at its summit serves as a beacon for ships approaching from the open sea. By day, a great bronze mirror reflects sunlight toward the horizon, visible even in bright conditions. The engineering required to construct such a tower, to maintain the eternal flame at its summit, to polish and position the great mirror, represents the height of ancient technical achievement. The harbor itself is protected by a great mole, an artificial causeway that connects the lighthouse island to the mainland and creates 2 separate port basins. The eastern harbor, larger and deeper, accommodates the great grain ships that carry Egypt's wheat harvest to Rome. The western harbor serves smaller vessels engaged in local and regional trade. Between them, Shipyards build and repair the vessels upon which Alexandria's commerce depends. The streets of Alexandria bustle with people from every corner of the known world. There are Greeks and Egyptians, Romans and Jews, Arabs and Indians, Ethiopians and Persians. The languages spoken on the waterfront include Greek, the common tongue of educated commerce, along with Latin, Egyptian, Hebrew, Aramaic, and dozens of others. The population approaches perhaps 1 million at the height of the city's prosperity, making it the second largest city in the Roman Empire after Rome itself. The city is laid out on a grid plan, its broad main streets intersecting at right angles, flanked by colonnades that provide shelter from the Mediterranean sun. The central avenue, the Canopic Way, stretches for more than 3 miles from the eastern gate to the western, its width accommodating chariots, wagons, pedestrians, and the occasional camel caravan arriving from or departing for the interior. The Jewish quarter occupies a substantial portion of the city, home to the largest Jewish community in the ancient world. Here, synagogues serve congregations whose ancestors have lived in Egypt since the time of the Babylonian exile, 600 years before. Jewish scholars in Alexandria produce the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures that will become the basis for Christian Old Testament traditions. Jewish philosophers here attempted to reconcile their ancestral faith with Greek philosophical traditions, creating intellectual syntheses that will influence religious thought for millennia. The markets of Alexandria offer finished goods of exceptional quality. Egyptian linen is famous throughout the world for its fineness and durability. Glassmakers produce vessels of remarkable delicacy and beauty, some decorated with gold leaf and precious stones. Metalworkers create jewelry and decorative objects that combine Greek aesthetic sensibilities with Egyptian symbolic traditions, and the spice trade passes through here, with warehouses full of pepper and cinnamon, frankincense and myrrh, bound for markets throughout the Roman world. The spice trade connects Alexandria not only to the Silk Road but to the maritime routes of the Indian Ocean. Ships sail from the Red Sea port of Berenice, taking advantage of the monsoon winds to cross the open ocean to India in a matter of weeks. They return laden with pepper and cinnamon, with gemstones and cotton textiles, with exotic animals and rare woods. This sea route offers an alternative to the overland Silk Road. Faster and cheaper for some goods, though more dangerous in the storm-prone Indian Ocean. The Library of Alexandria, though diminished from its earlier glory, still contains one of the greatest collections of knowledge in the ancient world. Scholars come here from throughout the Mediterranean and beyond to study manuscripts collected over centuries. The nearby museum, a research institution supported by royal and later imperial patronage, has been home to some of the greatest minds of antiquity, mathematicians and astronomers, physicians and philosophers, engineers and poets. The library's collection methods were legendary and sometimes controversial. Royal decree required that all ships entering Alexandria's harbor surrender any scrolls they carried for copying. The originals were kept by the library and copies returned to the owners. Scholars from throughout the Greek world donated or bequeathed their personal libraries. Agents traveled to distant lands to purchase manuscripts, sometimes paying enormous sums for rare or unique texts. The loss of much of this collection through fire, neglect, and the shifting priorities of successive regimes represents one of the great tragedies of ancient history. But enough remains, in copies and translations scattered throughout the Mediterranean world, to give some sense of what was lost. Works of science and philosophy, of history and poetry, of mathematics and medicine, representing centuries of human inquiry into the nature of the world. From Alexandria, goods travel by various routes to their final destinations. Ships carry cargoes to ports throughout the Mediterranean, to Rome and its harbor at Ostia, to Carthage and the cities of North Africa, to the ports of Spain and Gaul, to Constantinople and the cities of the Black Sea coast. The maritime routes connecting the Mediterranean world are among the most heavily trafficked in the ancient world. Hundreds of ships make the voyage between Egypt and Italy each year, their holds filled with grain to feed Rome's million inhabitants, with luxury goods for the wealthy, with all the necessities and frivolities that maintain the imperial capital. The voyage from Alexandria to Rome takes approximately 2 weeks under favorable conditions, though contrary winds can extend this to a month or more. The ships follow coastal routes when possible, putting into port at night or during storms, but the open crossing from Africa to Sicily must be made without refuge, and this stretch claims many vessels each year. The grain ships are the giants of ancient maritime commerce, some capable of carrying more than 1,000 tons of cargo. These vessels are too large to navigate the Tiber River to Rome itself, and instead discharge their cargoes at Ostia, Rome's artificial harbor, where the grain is loaded onto smaller boats or onto wagons for the final 15 miles to the capital. The Roman port of Ostia is one of the engineering marvels of the ancient world. The natural coastline offered no adequate harbor, and so Roman engineers created one. Dredging basins, building moles and breakwaters, constructing warehouses and administrative buildings. The result is a port capable of handling the enormous volume of traffic that Rome's appetites demand. The warehouses of Ostia contain goods from throughout the known world. Grain from Egypt and North Africa fills the largest structures, awaiting distribution to the bakeries that feed the Roman population. Wine and olive oil from Italy, Greece, and Spain fill thousands of amphorae stacked in orderly rows. And the luxury goods of the East, silk and spices, gems and glassware, occupy secure facilities where their value can be protected. The final destination of many Silk Road goods is Rome itself, the Eternal City, capital of an empire that stretches from Britain to Mesopotamia, from the Rhine to the Sahara. Rome at its height is home to perhaps 1 million inhabitants, the largest city the Western world has ever known. The approach to Rome from Ostia follows the Via Ostiensis, one of the many paved roads that radiate from the capital like spokes from a wheel. These roads, engineering achievements that will not be matched in Europe for more than a millennium, connect Rome to every corner of its vast empire. All roads lead to Rome is not merely a proverb, but a literal description of the transportation network that sustains imperial power. The city itself sprawls across its famous 7 hills, its boundaries marked by massive walls that enclose an area of some 5 square miles. Within these walls, imperial palaces stand alongside tenement apartments, magnificent temples neighbor crowded markets. Great public buildings share space with private homes ranging from modest to magnificent. The Forum, the ancient heart of Roman public life, is crowded with monuments to military victories, to deified emperors, to the gods who have blessed Roman arms. Triumphal arches commemorate campaigns in distant lands. Some of these campaigns fought along routes that the Silk Road merchants also travel. The Senate House, though now subordinate to imperial power, still meets to conduct such business as the emperor permits. The great markets of Rome are among the wonders of the ancient world. Trajan's Market, a multi-story commercial complex built into the slopes of the Quirinal Hill, contains more than 150 individual shops arranged around a central hall. Here, merchants offer goods from throughout the empire and beyond. Foods and wines, fabrics and jewelry, tools and household goods, and the exotic products of the East that Roman consumers have learned to desire. The goods that have traveled the length of the Silk Road, silk from China, spices from India, gems from Central Asia, perfumes from Arabia, find their ultimate consumers among the Roman elite. The wealth concentrated in Rome is staggering, and the appetite for luxury goods seems unlimited. Merchants who can deliver exotic Eastern commodities to Roman markets can make enormous profits. Silk appears in Roman markets primarily as finished garments and textile items. The heavy Chinese brocades have been reworked by craftsmen in the Eastern Mediterranean, the original fabric unraveled, and the threads rewoven into lighter, more diaphanous textiles better suited to Roman tastes and the Mediterranean climate. These transparent silks, through which the body is clearly visible, have scandalized Roman moralists but delighted Roman consumers. The Roman Senate has repeatedly attempted to regulate silk consumption, passing laws that forbid men from wearing the fabric and that limit the amounts that women may purchase. These laws have had little effect. The demand for silk continues to grow, and the merchants who supply it continue to prosper. Spices appear in Roman kitchens and medicine cabinets, their uses ranging from culinary enhancement to medical treatment to religious ritual. Pepper is the most important, used to flavor meats and sauces, to preserve foods against spoilage, to demonstrate the wealth and sophistication of the household that serves it. Cinnamon and cassia, cloves and nutmeg, cardamom and saffron. Each has its place in the Roman larder. Each has traveled thousands of miles to reach this table. The wealthy districts of Rome contain mansions of extraordinary luxury, their walls covered with frescoes and their floors paved with mosaics. In these houses, Chinese silk appears as garments and wall hangings, Indian pepper seasons elaborate dishes, Central Asian gems adorn the fingers and necks of noble women. The journey from Chang'an to Rome, more than 4,000 miles over mountains and deserts across countless frontiers through dozens of kingdoms and trading posts, ends in these halls of Roman opulence. While silk moves westward along the Silk Road, a vast array of goods travels in the opposite direction, bound for the markets of China and the East. The trade is not one-directional, but a complex exchange, with commodities moving in both directions and value being added at every stage along the route. From the Roman world comes glassware, one of the most prized commodities in Chinese markets. Roman glassblowers have developed techniques that allow them to produce vessels of remarkable delicacy and transparency, unlike anything Chinese craftsmen can yet achieve. These glass objects, cups and bowls, bottles and beads, are highly valued by Chinese consumers, who regard them as exotic treasures from the Western lands. Woolen textiles from the Mediterranean region also find ready markets in the East. The wool of European sheep, particularly the fine varieties from Spain and Britain, can be woven into fabrics unlike any produced in China. These woolens are valued for their warmth and durability, qualities that make them popular in the colder regions of the Chinese Empire. From the Arabian Peninsula comes frankincense and myrrh, the aromatic resins that have been prized throughout the ancient world for thousands of years. These substances are used in religious rituals, in medicine, and in the production of perfumes and cosmetics. Chinese consumers value them highly, and significant quantities make the long journey along the Silk Road each year. From India come cotton textiles, diamonds, and other precious stones, and various medicinal substances. Indian merchants are active participants in Silk Road trade, operating trading posts and commercial networks that extend from the Malabar coast to the markets of Central Asia. From Persia come silver and gold, worked into jewelry and decorative objects of exceptional quality. Persian carpets and textiles with their distinctive designs and rich colors are valued throughout the Eastern markets. Horses from the Persian plateau and the Central Asian steppes are always in demand in China, where they are used by the military and prized by the wealthy. The return journey from Rome to Chang'an follows essentially the same route as the outward journey, though merchants may choose different paths depending on the season, political conditions, and their specific commercial objectives. The same oasis towns and caravanserais provide rest and resupply. The same mountain passes must be crossed. The same deserts must be traversed. But the experience is different on the return, for the merchants are now traveling toward home, toward familiar lands and waiting families, toward the completion of a commercial venture that has occupied years of their lives. The eastern horizon calls them forward, just as the western horizon called them at the journey's beginning. The Silk Road carried far more than material goods. Along its length traveled ideas and beliefs, technologies and artistic styles, languages and customs, all the intangible elements of culture that shape human civilization. This cultural exchange may ultimately have been more significant than the commercial trade that drove it. Buddhism traveled the Silk Road from India to China, transforming both societies in the process. The Buddhist monks who crossed the mountain passes and desert wastes carried with them sacred texts and images, meditation techniques and philosophical teachings. Chinese pilgrims made the reverse journey, traveling to India to study at Buddhist monasteries and bring back authentic teachings to share with their countrymen. The transmission of Buddhism along the Silk Road required not merely the physical transport of texts and images, but the translation of ideas across profound cultural and linguistic barriers. Indian concepts expressed in Sanskrit had to find expression in Chinese, a language with completely different grammatical structures, writing systems, and philosophical vocabulary. This process of translation required not only linguistic skill but deep understanding of both traditions, and it occupied generations of scholars in monasteries along the route. The results of this translation effort transformed Chinese civilization. Buddhist ideas about karma and rebirth, about the nature of suffering and the possibility of liberation, found resonance with Chinese audiences and blended with indigenous Confucian and Taoist traditions. Buddhist monasteries became centers of learning and social welfare, offering education, medical care, and refuge to travelers and the destitute. Buddhist art introduced new subjects and techniques that revolutionized Chinese visual culture. The great Chinese monk Xuanzang made this journey in the 7th century, spending 16 years traveling the Silk Road, studying in India, and returning with hundreds of Buddhist texts that he spent the rest of his life translating. His account of his travels, preserved in Chinese literature, provides one of our most detailed descriptions of Silk Road geography and society. Along with Buddhism came other Indian influences, mathematical concepts including the number 0 and the decimal system, medical knowledge preserved in Sanskrit texts, artistic styles that would transform Chinese sculpture and painting. These ideas traveled through the same channels as the physical goods, carried by merchants and monks, scholars and travelers. The decimal place value system, invented in India, traveled the Silk Road to the Islamic world, where it was refined and transmitted to Europe. This mathematical notation, which we now call Arabic numerals, made complex calculations far easier than the cumbersome systems used in the Roman world. Without it, the scientific and commercial revolutions that transformed Europe in later centuries would have been far more difficult, perhaps impossible. Indian astronomical knowledge also traveled westward, contributing to the development of Islamic astronomy, which in turn influenced European science. The astronomical observatories of Central Asia, built by Islamic rulers who valued scientific knowledge, drew upon Indian, Greek, and Chinese traditions to create new understandings of the heavens. From China came technological innovations that would eventually transform the West. Papermaking spread westward after Chinese papermakers were captured by Arab forces at the Battle of Talas in 751 CE. The prisoners taught their captors the techniques of producing paper from plant fibers, and within a few decades paper mills were operating throughout the Islamic world. Eventually, this knowledge reached Europe, enabling the revolution in literacy that would follow the invention of printing. Gunpowder and the compass, though their spread to the west is more complex, also owe something to the networks of exchange established by Silk Road trade. Chinese alchemists discovered gunpowder while searching for an elixir of immortality. The explosive substance was initially used for fireworks and religious ceremonies before being adapted for weapons. The magnetic compass, used for navigation in Chinese waters for centuries, eventually reached the Mediterranean and contributed to the age of European exploration. The religions of the West also traveled eastward along the Silk Road. Nestorian Christianity established communities throughout Central Asia and China, with churches and monasteries documented as far east as Xi'an. The Nestorians, followers of the 5th century patriarch Nestorius, who was condemned as a heretic by the Council of Ephesus, found refuge beyond the borders of the Roman Empire and carried their faith along the trade routes to distant lands. A remarkable stone monument discovered in Xi'an in the 17th century records the arrival of Nestorian missionaries in China in the 7th century and describes the community's growth over the following centuries. This so-called Nestorian stele, inscribed in both Chinese and Syriac, stands as evidence of the religious diversity that characterized Silk Road society and of the possibilities for exchange between civilizations that seemed utterly remote from one another. Manichaeism, the dualistic religion founded by the Persian prophet Mani in the 3rd century, spread along the trade routes to become briefly one of the major world religions. Mani consciously designed his faith to appeal to followers of different traditions, incorporating elements of Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Buddhism into a synthesis that proved remarkably popular along the Silk Road. Manichaean communities existed from the Mediterranean to China, and for a period in the 8th and 9th centuries, Manichaeism was the state religion of the Uyghur Khaganate in Central Asia. Zoroastrianism influenced the religious development of Central Asia, leaving traces that persist to this day. The Zoroastrian emphasis on the cosmic struggle between good and evil, its expectation of a final judgment, its reverence for fire as a symbol of divine truth. These ideas spread beyond the boundaries of Persia proper and influenced other religious traditions along the route. Judaism and later Islam also traveled the Silk Road. Jewish merchant communities existed in many Silk Road cities, maintaining their faith and traditions across thousands of miles. The Jewish community of Kaifeng in China, established during the Song dynasty, survived for centuries as a remote outpost of Jewish civilization, preserving religious practices and texts that connected them to their co-religionists across the vast spaces of Asia. Islamic traders became increasingly important along the route from the 7th century onward, eventually transforming the religious landscape of Central Asia into the predominantly Muslim region it remains today. The spread of Islam along the Silk Road was gradual and largely peaceful, driven more by the prestige of Islamic civilization and the practical advantages of sharing a common faith with important trading partners than by military conquest. Artistic styles flowed in both directions along the route. The Buddhist art of the Gandhara region, where Greek and Indian traditions fused to create the first human images of the Buddha, influenced sculpture throughout East Asia. Before Gandhara, Buddhist art had represented the Buddha only through symbols, his footprints, the Bodhi tree under which he achieved enlightenment, the wheel of Dharma. The Greeks who settled in Central Asia after Alexander's conquests brought with them traditions of human representation in religious art, and these traditions combined with Indian devotion to produce the familiar images of the Buddha that now seem universal to Buddhist practice. Chinese artistic techniques, including silk painting and certain styles of pottery decoration, spread westward to influence Persian and eventually European art. The flowing lines and natural subjects that characterize Chinese landscape painting found admirers along the Silk Road and contributed to the development of Islamic decorative arts. Musical instruments and musical traditions also traveled the Silk Road. The pipa, a pear-shaped lute that became one of the quintessential Chinese instruments, originated in Persia and traveled eastward along the trade routes. The zheng, a Chinese zither, influenced the development of similar instruments in Central Asia and beyond. Melodies and rhythmic patterns, performance traditions, and musical theories crossed cultural boundaries through the networks of exchange. The Silk Road flourished for more than 1,000 years, surviving the rise and fall of empires, adapting to changing political circumstances, continuing to connect East and West through all the turbulence of ancient and medieval history. But eventually, the great trade routes that had shaped world history began to decline. Several factors contributed to this decline. The rise of maritime trade routes connecting Europe directly with Asia offered a more efficient alternative to the dangerous overland journey. Portuguese and later Dutch, English, and French ships could carry larger quantities of goods more safely and more cheaply than overland caravans. Political fragmentation along the route made overland trade increasingly difficult. The great empires that had once provided security and stability, Han China, the Sasanian Persians, the Byzantine Romans, gave way to smaller, weaker states that could not maintain the infrastructure or guarantee the safety of merchants. Changes in demand also played a role. As silk production spread beyond China, first to Byzantium, where, according to legend, silkworm eggs were smuggled out by monks in the 6th century, and later throughout the Mediterranean and Europe, the need to import Chinese silk diminished. Other goods that had driven the trade became available from closer sources or fell out of fashion. By the time European explorers began their voyages of discovery in the 15th century, the Silk Road had already faded from its earlier glory. The cities that had flourished along its length had shrunk or disappeared. The caravanserais stood empty. The great bazaars that had once buzzed with commerce from throughout the known world grew quiet. But the legacy of the Silk Road lived on in the cultures it had transformed, the religions it spread, the technologies it transmitted, the artistic traditions it mixed and transformed. All these continued to shape human civilization long after the last camel caravan had made its way across the Taklamakan. And now, as your breathing deepens and your consciousness begins to drift toward the peaceful shores of sleep, let the images of the Silk Road fade gently from your mind. Let the camels and merchants, the mountain passes and desert crossings, the magnificent cities and lonely oases, all dissolve like morning mist in the warmth of the sun. You have traveled far tonight, across thousands of miles and thousands of years, following the footsteps of countless merchants, pilgrims, and adventurers who walked these ancient paths before you. You have seen wonders that few eyes in any age were privileged to witness: the golden domes of Samarkand, the great arch of Ctesiphon, the lighthouse of Alexandria, the endless sands of the Taklamakan. These visions can remain with you as you sleep, not as vivid memories but as gentle presences, like distant music heard from another room. The rhythm of the caravan's movement can rock you deeper into rest. The silence of the desert can settle around you like a blanket. The ancient stars that guided Silk Road travelers can watch over you now as they watched over merchants and monks 2,000 years ago. The Silk Road reminds us that humanity has always been connected, has always reached across vast distances to trade and learn and exchange, has always sought to know what lies beyond the horizon. The same curiosity that drove Sogdian merchants to brave the Taklamakan drives us still, in our own ways and our own times. Sleep now, and let that ancient curiosity rest as well. Tomorrow will bring its own journeys, its own discoveries, its own opportunities to connect and exchange and learn. Tonight, let the Silk Road carry you gently into dreams, across landscapes of sand and snow, through cities of legendary splendor, toward whatever peaceful visions await you in the realm of sleep. In your dreams tonight, perhaps you will see the last caravan making its way across the desert. The camels move slowly, their burdens light, their shadows stretching long across the sand as the sun sets behind distant mountains. The merchants ride in silence, their thoughts turned inward, contemplating the journey completed and the journey that still awaits. The oasis towns they pass have changed since the days of glory. The great bazaars are smaller now, the caravanserais half empty. But trade continues, as it always has, as it always will. For human beings will always create things of value and seek to exchange them with others. The guards who accompany the caravan are fewer than in earlier times, for the roads are safer now, or perhaps simply because there is less wealth to protect. They ride with professional alertness, but their manner suggests routine rather than danger. The bandits who once preyed upon the route have moved on to other opportunities. The caravan master is old, one of the last to know the route as thoroughly as those who came before. He has stories of earlier journeys, of the days when caravans stretched for miles across the desert, when the markets of Samarkand and Kashgar overflowed with goods from every corner of the world. He tells these stories at night around the campfire, passing on knowledge that will soon be forgotten. And yet, even as this era fades, new connections are being forged. Ships sail from Lisbon and Amsterdam, from Venice and Genoa, bound for the Spice Islands and the ports of India and China. The same goods that once crossed the Silk Road on camelback now travel in the holds of great sailing vessels. The network of exchange adapts, transforms, continues. For the Silk Road was never really about the particular paths that merchants followed, the specific cities where they traded, the physical infrastructure of roads and bridges and caravanserais. The Silk Road was about the human impulse to connect, to trade, to learn from others, to carry the products of one civilization to the markets of another. That impulse remains with us today, expressed in different forms, in container ships and cargo planes, in fiber optic cables and satellite links, in the countless ways we continue to exchange goods and ideas across the vast distances of our world. The Silk Road has not ended. It has only changed its shape. As you drift now toward the deepest waters of sleep, let all these images settle gently around you. Let the golden light of distant cities warm you. Let the cool breath of mountain passes refresh you. Let the peaceful silence of the desert embrace you. You are safe now, resting in the ancient stillness that lies beneath all movement and change. The camels have stopped their walking. The merchants have set aside their account books. The guards have sheathed their weapons. Even the wind that forever stirs the sands of the Taklamakan has grown calm. The stars that shine above you are the same stars that shone above Chang'an and Rome above Samarkand and Alexandria, above all the countless souls who lived and traded and dreamed along these ancient paths. The light that reaches your eyes tonight left those stars thousands of years ago, traveling through the void while empires rose and fell, while caravans crossed deserts and oceans, while humanity slowly wove the tapestry of connection that now encircles the globe. In the great span of time and space, your brief rest tonight is a small thing, a moment of stillness in the endless flow of existence. But it is your moment, your stillness, your rest. Claim it fully. Let nothing disturb your peace. Let the ancient wisdom of the Silk Road, that connection is possible, that differences can be bridged, that the stranger on the road may become a friend, settle into your heart as you sleep. Tomorrow you will wake to your own world, your own concerns, your own journeys to make. But tonight, you have been a traveler on the greatest route in human history, a participant in the exchange that shaped civilizations. Carry that memory with you as a gift, a reminder that you are part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. Sleep well now, traveler. The caravan has reached its destination. The goods have been sold, the bargains struck, the stories shared around 1,000 campfires. The long journey is complete. Let the gentle darkness of the desert night enfold you. Let the rhythm of the caravan's movement still echo in your dreams. Let the ancient peace of the Silk Road carry you safely through the hours until morning. Sleep, sleep, sleep. In the silent hours before dawn, when the world holds its breath between one day and the next, the ghosts of ancient merchants still walk the Silk Road. You cannot see them with waking eyes, but in dreams they are sometimes visible, their loaded camels moving steadily westward, their faces weathered by sun and wind, their eyes fixed on distant horizons. They pass through landscapes that have changed beyond recognition, through cities that exist now only as ruins, through deserts that have been crossed by highways and railways. But the impulse that drove them remains unchanged. The desire to see what lies beyond the next mountain, to trade with peoples unknown, to learn the secrets of distant lands. If you ever find yourself traveling through Central Asia, following the path of the ancient Silk Road, you may feel their presence still. In the old bazaars of Bukhara and Samarkand, in the ruins of ancient Merv, in the cave temples of Dunhuang, something of the old magic lingers. The same stars shine overhead, the same winds blow across the steppes, the same mountains rise against the sky. And perhaps in the quiet moments between one thought and the next, you will hear the distant sound of camel bells, the voices of merchants calling their wares, the creak of leather and the soft padding of feet upon sand. The Silk Road endures, not as a physical path, but as an idea, a reminder that connection is possible, that distances can be crossed, that humanity is one family spread across a vast and wonderful world. Sleep now and carry that idea with you into dreams. Sleep and let the ancient road guide you through the night. Sleep and know that you are never truly alone, for the network of connection that began on the Silk Road now encircles the globe, linking every heart to every other heart, every dream to every other dream. The road goes on forever, but for now, for this night, let it carry you gently into rest. Good night, traveler. May your dreams be peaceful and your sleep be deep. The Silk Road watches over you,